Benvenuti cari amici Samu Bit di questo nuovo video. Oggi andiamo a parlare di questo video da parte di Altcoin Daily, secondo me fortemente interessante, assolutamente da vedere, in cui Gareth Soloway afferma che Bitcoin potrebbe arrivare addirittura a $12.000. E per cui iniziamo subito. Tra l'altro vi ricordo che il buon Gareth disse quando Bitcoin stava a $60.000 che sarebbe dampato a $20.000 e per cui iniziamo subito.
Here with 20-year trading veteran Gareth Soloway. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Austin. It's truly a pleasure.
Dude, it's a pleasure for me. And just so our audience can, for those who don't know, you can get to know you a little better. And correct me if I'm wrong, when Bitcoin last year was at 60K, you were calling for 20K. When Bitcoin hit 20K, you were calling for a bounce, which happened. So I'm just here to talk to you about, where do you see Bitcoin going,
Yeah, so it's been a wild road. One of the things, I'm a little different from most crypto people because I screw up with stocks, right? So I still do a ton of stocks, but what that enabled me to do is I started in the late 90s when the dot-com bubble was like, the crazy moves, and it was so interesting because it was like the beginning of my career, and it was like deja vu in 2021 when you had some of these Dogecoin moves and stuff like that, because I'm like, wait a minute, I remember that happening exactly with like .com, like pets.com, like these weird random .com companies. And so I started to be a little bit more nervous. I'm like, this is exactly like a bubble. And ultimately we know what happens when bubbles collapse. Everything gets demolished like we've seen. So that was really it. And yeah, I mean, Bitcoin has had a big fall. I still remember last year in Dubai at the blockchain summit, I was the least popular guy there because I was warning people. I was like, Bitcoin's going to collapse. Be ready. It's going to 20,000. And of course, no one wanted to talk to me. I still remember presenting, and there was like a gasp when I said that because everyone was like, "Oh, it's 100,000 by the end of November, right?" But yeah, fascinating stuff to watch. And it's the biggest thing to understand, and this goes for everything: commodities, crypto, stocks. Is that when you're trading anything, you're not trading like Ethereum per se. You're trading humans, human emotion, right? So how do people feel? And that's one of the reasons why I love charting, is because it's so pure in that it's not about what you're trading, it's just the people that are trading it, the human emotion that's driving it. So greed and fear, right? The two most carnal, emotional drivers of the human race, that's what rules price.
Secondo me è molto interessante quello che ha detto Gareth all'interno di questo video, che sostanzialmente afferma che quando c'era piena FOMO, a novembre naturalmente tutti noi eravamo presi dalle emozioni, e quando si tratta di trading, quando si tratta di investire in borsa, bisogna mettere assolutamente le emozioni da parte, come fanno i trader.
I mean, it's sort of a bounce right now, which would indicate greed, but I think the market still seems very fearful. So what are your just general next price targets for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll show my chart. We can kind of go over some things here.
Do it.
Eccoci, ora andiamo a vedere quindi quella che è l'azione di Bitcoin. Naturalmente, come vedete, il prezzo stava al di sopra, addirittura di $50.000. Ora siamo arrivati con un bel bottom sui $20.000 e c'è stata questa breve risposta. Ok, andiamo a vedere che cosa ci dice Gareth.
So what we have here, and again, this is the beauty of it, right, is that it's no coincidence that Bitcoin found a bottom right around that 2017 high. Technically speaking, that is a major retrace. Basically, you had the breakout right here, and then the big long up and downs, and then we came back to settle in. So in the short term, that was support. It was kind of one of those easier calls for me to say, yeah, it's going to bounce. Even in spite of what happened to Voyager and Celsius with the bankruptcies, it's still, there was so much negativity that it's hard for me when there's that much negativity to not be slightly positive and bullish. I've just trained my mind to start kind of...
Ok, in sostanza quindi che cosa ci dice Gareth? Quando stava sui 60.000 lui aveva l'idea che avremmo potuto dampare, così è stato. Successivamente il maio 2017 per lui è divenuto un bottom. E per cui cosa si è detto? Si è detto, è venuto la storia di Celsius, la storia di Terra Luna e così via. Ora, quando le cose vanno male è ancora più difficile che vanno male. Di conseguenza lui ha detto ok, ora sono leggermente positivo e rialzista. Infatti c'è stato questo risposta di Bitcoin, siamo passati dai $17.700 agli attuali $24.000. Andiamo a vedere che cosa ci dice ora.
So what we've seen here is this kind of choppy sideways action, slowly moving up. I'll show you the coolest chart here. So if we bring up a parallel channel and we just connect the recent lows, I want to show you what happens. If we extend that up, you basically connect the recent highs right here, right? High pivot, right to here. And what that tells you is that right around 25,000, you're going to start running into a little bit of resistance, 25,000, 25.5. And interestingly enough, if you look at the Terra Luna collapse low, that happens to be right up in that same range. So expect some trouble for Bitcoin. I'm not saying it's going to fall back and collapse back down from there, but I think 25.5 is my short-term price target. And then after that, if it can get through 25.5, you have a good shot at going to about 28 to 30,000. 28,000 here, you can see all these little, like, kind of this sideways action. What that is it's creating this kind of resistance point. So if price trades up into that, it's going to slam into it, and it's going to have a lot of trouble getting out of that range. And let me just explain the psychology of this, and I hope you don't mind.
Ok, quindi sostanzialmente secondo Gareth succederà la seguente cosa. La Bitcoin potrebbe arrivare sui 25.500 dollari. Nel caso che riuscirà a passarli, probabilmente avremo una nuova resistenza sui 28.000, ok, come prima cosa. Andiamo a vedere ancora.
And me kind of going off on these tangents.
Please do it.
But what happens the reason why this is now resistance is because psychologically back then you had a lot of people buying, right? That's when you go sideways, it tells you there's an equal amount of buyers and sellers. So there were a lot of new buyers that were kind of taking a stab right here, and it broke down. So all those people are underwater in their trade. And the reason why it's resistance is when the price comes back to that level, those people are finally like, thank goodness, I'm break even. Thank goodness, now sell. I'm just done with this and I'm going to get out, right? And that's why, so that selling pressure should come out there. So the bottom line is I am still bullish on Bitcoin near term, but I expect 25.5 to be resistance. If it can get through that, 28,000, 30,000 is kind of my upside secondary target there. So yeah, it's fun stuff. I mean, I love charting. I love being able to kind of look at things from a psychological aspect, about reading the human emotion. And it's amazing how you start, if you think about that and you look back when we were at 68,000 and the bullish sentiment was so pervasive, like think about now saying, wait a minute, now that I know emotion and you go the opposite, maybe I shouldn't have been long at 68,000. It was a good indicator it might have been topping out.
La cosa interessante secondo me è la seguente, cioè quando arrivò lo scam di Terra Luna, ok, il prezzo di Bitcoin stava sui 40.000 dollari, successivamente è andato a crollare sui 28, tutti pensavano che i 28 ok, avrebbero tenuto, ma così non fu. Di conseguenza che cosa lui ci dice? Attenzione, perché in tantissimi sono andati a comprare sui 28.000, quindi se Bitcoin andrà a passare i 25.500, che sono la prima resistenza, e successivamente andrà a attaccare i 28.000-30.000, lì potremo avere delle liquidazioni, perché chi tornerà in pareggio potrebbe dire, ok, Bitcoin è volatile, Bitcoin è debole in questo momento, ci troviamo all'interno di una recessione economica, di conseguenza vado a vendere.
In this last week, the Federal Reserve announced 75 basis point rate hikes. Talk to me about your further term outlook for Bitcoin, end of 2022 into 2023. How does all those macro factors play into Bitcoin?
Yeah, and that's such a good question because the Fed absolutely has an impact. One of the things that I always say to crypto traders is, remember, when you're in crypto, it's not an isolated bubble. You need to know what the Fed's doing. You need to watch the dollar. Even the stock market, we know that Bitcoin has followed the NASDAQ very closely in terms of technology because it's a risk-on asset. So when it goes to the Fed just recently raised by 75 basis points. The key here is understanding what their outlook is after that. So going into this, everyone knew they were going to raise 75. I saw it everywhere on Twitter, and people were right. The question was, and the reason why we've seen a continued rally is because the statement afterwards, when Jerome Powell did his press conference, was very dovish. He basically admitted that they were almost done hiking. Well, if they're almost done hiking, that means a more lenient Fed, which means more money in the system, which is a positive for Bitcoin. More money can go into Bitcoin, and you can see it go up. So shorter term, I would say over the next the next month or so, I'm bullish on that aspect. Now, you asked me about 6 to 12 months out. This is the kicker, and this is what I'm really fearful about. And one of the reasons why I still think we have one more leg down on Bitcoin is that we have inflation still at 10%. It's going to come down. We've seen commodity prices drop substantially, so that tells us it's going to come down, but it's not going back to 2%. It's probably going to stay around 4 to 5%. The reason why that's really bad is because as we go into a recession, and we saw the GDP number today basically telling us we're in a recession, the Fed cannot save us like past recessions. So if you go back to 2009, we had this great recession, Fed printed trillions of dollars. COVID comes up, trillions of dollars, right? Well, that was all okay because inflation was 2% or under. With 5% inflation, if they start printing again, you're going to see inflation at 15, 20%. So they can't do that. And so how do they save the economy? And if Bitcoin is still a risk asset, if the NASDAQ collapses, if the S&P collapses, I think, again, Bitcoin has one more leg down to probably around 12 to 13,000. So my 6 to 12 month target is one more leg lower, then a bottom is put in, and then I think the next great bull run starts probably in late 2023, and then again you're looking at easy 100,000, maybe above.
Ora, questo punto secondo me è il più importante, perché cosa ci dice? L'inflazione sta aumentando in maniera galoppante. Siamo arrivati quasi al 10% negli Stati Uniti. Ovviamente non è sostenibile questa inflazione, perché sennò veramente andiamo tutti al macello. Però l'inflazione non tornerà più al 2%, e quindi la Fed questa volta non può risolverla sostanzialmente stampando denaro. Quindi probabilmente avremo un dump dei mercati, Dow Jones, Nasdaq potrebbero addirittura perdere il 20%, e pensate che catombe potrebbe significare questo per Bitcoin. Secondo Gareth, Bitcoin potrebbe arrivare a 12.000-13.000 dollari per poi riprendersi a fine 2023 e andare verso i 100.000 dollari, per cui potrebbe fare un 10x secondo Gareth dai minimi, ed è un po' quello che vedemmo ai tempi del Covid, quando si passò dai 3.500 fino ai 60.000 dollari. Ovviamente ce lo auspichiamo tutti.
So you don't think sub 10k Bitcoin is in the cards in the most probable sense? Anything's in the cards in your opinion?
I'm hoping it's not. This is the worst case scenario, right? And this is the one that has Bitcoin going down maybe as low as 3,500, but let's hopefully, try not to talk about it too much.
Da sottolineare che secondo Gareth questo è il peggior scenario possibile per Bitcoin.
But basically, if you look at the dot-com bubble, which the similarities are eerie, like for instance, just a couple similarities. When Bitcoin was topping out last year, we had this February, it was known as the crypto Super Bowl. We had so many crypto Super Bowl ads. If you go back to the dot-com era, just before the collapse, it was known as the dot-com Super Bowl. All these things. The market caps, 3.1 trillion at the highs for Bitcoin and crypto, 2.9 trillion for dot-coms. The same sort of things are replicating, and the reason I bring that up is that if Amazon was $112 stock back then, it collapsed to about $6 during the dot-com bubble. Then it went to 3,500. So think about the X times from $6 to 3,500. If Bitcoin drops that amount, it puts it at about the 3,500 marker. So that would be a worst case scenario. I don't think anyone wants to see that, but that would be the absolute washout of the crypto space, which I think you would agree, Austin, is you almost need to see some sort of washout, because how does a space work with 20,000 cryptocurrencies? I just don't know. It just seems like too much for me.
100%. SHIB, Doge, they're still top 15. And, they're above Avalanche and some of these others. So a washout to me still makes sense. Yeah. So, I think 12, 13,000 we'll see, but you might be right. And I kind of hope it's not. But, if that's what it takes to clean out the junk, think about the Darwinian thought process of like the strong survive. That's the healthiest thing. So a lot of crypto traders are like, oh my goodness, I hope that doesn't happen. But if you really believe in crypto, the long term of crypto, that's the healthiest thing to happen. Because look at Amazon, look at Google. All these companies were around right around that time frame. You had to get rid of the junk so that those could become multi-trillion-dollar companies.
Ok, quindi sostanzialmente Gareth paragona il mondo delle criptovalute a quello delle .com del 2000, dove sostanzialmente ci fu un iper mega pump, poi un dump assurdo, naturalmente tantissima spazzatura andata a morire, e così avverrà anche all'interno del mondo cripto. Vi ricordo che addirittura Amazon stava a $120, successivamente da un po' a $6 e ora sta a livelli assurdi, per cui chi comprò Amazon e la dip fece tantissimi soldi e probabilmente avrà lo stesso anche su Bitcoin e forse Ethereum in futuro. Per cui non andate a comprare spazzatura, se la comprate naturalmente con testa e noi continuiamo.
Once we do bottom, how long will it take, in your opinion, for Bitcoin to reach a new all-time high? Around what price?
Yeah, so I would say, again, probably bottoming in the next 6 to 12 months. And then I think you kind of repeat what you did in 2017, which is...
Ok, attenzione, questo è un punto focale perché gli chiede quando potrebbe arrivare il bottom, tra circa 6 mesi barra 12 mesi.
You'll have this choppy sideways time for like 6 months, and then you'll start your incline. So I think by 2024, you should be hitting that new all-time high zone. I know it's not what people want to hear. They want to hear it's instantaneous, but let it breathe, let it kind of get some energy back, and then we'll all be rewarded later on.
What is
E Bitcoin potrebbe ritornare verso i vecchi massimi già a partire dal 2024, secondo Gareth. Per cui lui sostanzialmente dice ora bisogna far respirare Bitcoin, bisogna far respirare l'intero ecosistema. Naturalmente secondo me quel dump è servito a far andare fuori, ok, letteralmente diciamo tra virgolette, dall'ecosistema tutte quelle persone che non appartengono assolutamente al mondo del cripto ma volevano solamente speculare.
what would you say for somebody maybe, coming into the market today, what would be like a safe place, the safest place to put your money in 2022?
Is that only in the crypto space, or am I allowed to talk outside?
Anywhere. Obviously,
Okay.
That would be Bitcoin, but
Right,
anywhere.
of course. So I happen to be a believer in gold right now. I think long-term Bitcoin far outperforms gold, but you can't deny the fact that if you go back to the beginning of this year, gold is the best performing between Bitcoin and the stock market. It's been the safest place to go. And I also think that because of the uncertainty about regulation with crypto, it's keeping a lot of money out. And so I think the safest play, if you're like, hey, listen, I want to put my money someplace, I might only earn 5 or 10% on it in a year, but that would be gold for now, I think. I think it's the safest place. Eventually, I think Bitcoin outperforms, but it's going to take this bear market to be over.
Talk to me about the stock market, and then also I want to go back to...
Ok, Austin gli chiede dove tu metteresti i soldi nel 2022? Gareth risponde assolutamente nell'oro, anche se sono convinto che in futuro Bitcoin andrà a performare l'oro.
The next Fed meeting is in September, and you said a potential bottom is in the next 6-8 months, I believe. Do you think that correlates with the stock market bottoming and the Fed's meeting pushing the final rate hike up?
Yeah, so I think with the stock market, it's going to be really interesting. So I think you have another big flush coming on the NASDAQ, on the S&P 500. I think you're seeing another 20-25% down on those. And I think Bitcoin's going to get affected. I think minimum 12,000, 13,000. We talked about worst case scenario. But I think there's going to be a flip point where at some point you're going to see an economy that's mired in stagflation, which means higher inflation with no growth, which is kind of like the boogeyman for economists, right? It's the worst case scenario. And I think at some point Bitcoin flips to start to go up during that period while the markets languish. And the reason I think that is because eventually we're going to be stuck in this recession and the Fed is going to have to start printing again. And as soon as the Fed does that, you're going to see people saying, hey, listen, they can't print too much because the economy can't handle inflation, but it's just that signal that makes Bitcoin kind of turn into a more safety play where people more and more money kind of rotates into that safe haven asset, which again, let's be clear, Bitcoin's not a safe haven asset right now, but I do think again, it eventually becomes that digital gold, and that's where it starts to outperform. So I kind of see a really tough road for the economy for the next multiple years, but I think Bitcoin bottoms out before the end of that and actually starts to move back up.
Allora, questo è il punto focale, cioè perché il buon Gareth dice, ok, 2022 vado a investire in oro, questa è un po' la sua idea su quanto riguarda i mercati. Probabilmente vedremo un dump collegato al fatto dell'inflazione e così via sull'azionario, meno 20% sull'S&P e così via. Però quello che ci dice è che non appena la ruota tornerà a girare, perché ricordatevi, nella vita la ruota torna, avremo la Fed che andrà nuovamente a stampare, perché avremo sostanzialmente inflazione, crescita zero, e per cui molto probabilmente la Fed ristamperà ancora denaro. Ed è allora lì che gli asset risk-on come Bitcoin torneranno a salire fortemente.
So much perspective. This interview is going to be a companion piece with your thoughts on Ethereum, altcoins. So if you know, this one was first, be ready for that Ethereum video with Gareth. He's dropping same day, but just final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily audience on the recession, on Bitcoin, on anything.
So my biggest thing is in recessions, we find out that we don't know everything, right? So I think in bull markets, everyone thinks they're a genius, right? Everyone makes money. In bear markets, we realize that we have to learn. And so I preach to people to get educated, because if you can learn one new thing about trading every day, you will be a different trader in a year, in 10 years, you'll be making so much more money. So education is so important. Remember that. And again, thank you for having me. It's great to talk.
Quindi qual è l'aspetto più importante di questo video che voglio che assolutamente rimanga? Nel bear market, ok, si fanno i soldi, ma lì sarà dura, ok, nel breve periodo avremo un dump, però chi saprà resistere, chi avrà la forza, ok, di perseverare e studiare, sarà lì che un giorno andrà a prendersi quel gain che tutti vogliono, cioè che potrà arrivare, ok, per Bitcoin 10x, 20x, lo vedremo. Io sono convinto che Bitcoin nella prossima bull run farà numeri di gran lunga più alti rispetto ai $69.000. Naturalmente, se ti è piaciuto questo video, ti ricordo di distruggere il bottone like, di iscriverti al canale e ci vediamo presto. Naturalmente vi ricordo anche i servizi che offro io. Se volete una lezione individuale di 30 minuti, il costo è di 25 euro, e in più potete abbonarvi sia al gruppo Elite, se volete, con un costo di 50 euro, e al gruppo Premium al costo di 24 euro. Per cui vi ricordo di distruggere il bottone like, di iscrivervi al canale e ci vediamo presto.